Okay, let's unpack this. We're going right to the heart of things today. An intellectual investigation into, well, the fundamental nature of the creator, and this is key, what that nature demands of humanity. This isn't a theological lesson. This is an exercise in pure rational inquiry based strictly on the sources you provided.
That's the mission, exactly. You asked us to apply intellectual scrutiny unflexed.
Mm.
So the goal is to find a rational, self-consistent, law-governed framework for these ultimate questions.
Anyway.
We're using the human intellect, the awatwal, to examine the Creator's laws, the Sunnat Allah, strictly as they are laid out in the Quran alone.
And it's a fascinating approach because it immediately reframes the divine. We aren't looking at God as some arbitrary, whimsical force who, changes the rules on a whim.
Right.
Instead, we're exploring the concept of the ultimate rational principle, the uncaused cause who establishes these immutable laws of causality and order in the universe. That's a fundamentally different starting point.
It is. It really is. And the entire rational edifice, it rests on three pillars that we need to explore in depth. First, the strict concept of absolute perfection. Then, the unwavering certainty of those unchanging laws. And finally, the profound, highly active responsibility it places squarely on you as the ultimate moral agent on earth.
So let's dive into that cornerstone then, Tawhid, the absolute oneness of God. It sounds simple, but how does the source define this oneness in a way that prevents all the philosophical confusion that usually follows?
Well, the definition has to be pristine, and the text provides it in Surah Al-Ikhlas. It's often considered the most concise theological statement ever written. It simply states, say, He is Allah, who is one, Allah, the eternal refuge. He neither begets nor is born, nor is there to him any equivalent.
Wow. That four-line synthesis is extraordinarily dense. It establishes God as singular ahad, so unique, self-sufficient, and unparalleled. It explicitly rejects any comparison or family structure.
It creates a clean philosophical space. If something is truly absolute, it can't be segmented, it can't be compared, it can't be dependent. It has to be a samad, the eternal refuge, dependent on nothing while everything depends on it. This purity of oneness is the logical foundation for all the laws that come after.
I have to ask about a point that always confuses people when they first read the source material. If the creator is absolutely absolute, one, why does the text sometimes use plural pronouns like, we created the heavens and the earth? It seems like a mathematical contradiction.
That's a great question, and it's where linguistic context matters hugely. This is the royal we, or the plural of majesty. It was a standard literary convention in classical Arabic for rulers, for high-status persons.
So the plurality is rhetorical. It's emphasizing scale and supreme authority, not numerical quantity. It's meant to magnify the power being used.
Precisely. The plurality emphasizes the immense scope and authority of the action, the grand scale of the creative act. But it does not denote numeric multiplicity. If it did, it would shatter the absolute unity established just a few verses away in Al-Ikhlas. It would create an internal contradiction, which this rational framework seeks to avoid at all costs.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Now let's tackle the most famous paradox in philosophy. The limits of power. If God is omnipotent, Al-Qadir, can he perform logical impossibilities? Can he, break logic?
If the framework is truly rational, we have to address this directly. The text defines omnipotence not as the ability to do anything, including the absurd, but as perfect power exercised without contradiction, and it's always governed by wisdom and justice.
Wait, but if he's all-powerful, why can't he just break the rules sometimes? Isn't being able to do anything the common definition of omnipotent?
It is, but that common definition is logically flawed. The Creator cannot perform logical impossibilities, like the famous rock so heavy he cannot lift it, because such demands are conceptually incoherent. They aren't coherent things that can be acted upon. Asking the Creator to break logic is like asking for a square circle to be drawn. The request itself is empty.
I see. So the limit isn't a limitation on power, but a rejection of absurdity. The divine is bound by logic because the divine is the source of logic.
Exactly. And the consequence of that logical perfection is profound. It means God cannot act unjustly or falsely.
Yeah.
Not because of some external constraint, but because injustice and falsehood are fundamentally incompatible with the divine essence and perfection. His attributes are necessary, they're non-contradictory. The system is inherently just, because if the source was arbitrary, the system itself would collapse into chaos.
That moves us perfectly into our next section. The system itself. If the essence of the creator is absolute perfection, what rules the engine of the cosmos? This is where we introduce the Sunnat Allah.
The unchanging law. This is the central, stabilizing concept for the entire rational framework. Sunnat Allah refers to the fixed, consistent, and reliable method by which the divine governs all creation and human affairs. And the foundational principle is extremely clear. Never will you find a change in the Sunnat of Allah.
That is an incredible guarantee of intellectual certainty. I mean, if the laws are unchanging, whether they're physical, moral, or social, then the universe is completely reliable. You know that if you put in a cause, you will get the guaranteed effect.
Absolutely, it guarantees the law of requital, or jaza. This means every action, whether good or bad, finds its proportional and inevitable return, ensuring the cosmos isn't chaotic. It's morally solvent.
So if the laws are fixed, does that mean the system fundamentally excludes the idea of arbitrary on-demand intervention, the classic miracle?
It suggests that divine action is systematic. Guidance, for example, isn't a random whisper. It's the light, the systemic principle that directs human will to align with these fixed laws of cause and effect. Look, if the law of gravity works 99.9% of the time but might randomly turn off for a minute, we couldn't build buildings. The certainty of Sunnat Allah applies equally to the moral and physical realms.
It sounds like the system respects effort. If I work hard and align my actions with the fixed law, I can expect a result. It removes fatalism and forces initiative.
It does, which is how we have to understand divine mercy, or Rama. In this rational framework, mercy isn't a sentimental flaw in the system or some kind of unearned grace. It is the majestic architecture of the law itself. It's systematic overcompensation.
That flips the traditional idea of mercy on its head. So it's not an exception to the rule. It's the rule, but a rule designed for bounty. How does that systemic mercy express itself practically?
Through the concept of righteous investment, or infaq. If you contrast the common notion of unearned grace with the Quranic idea, you see that divine blessings, Rama, are the guaranteed, bountiful consequences of human effort and righteous actions, amal salih.
So instead of grace being a random handout, mercy is a guaranteed multiplier built into the universal equation. You put in the sincere cause, and the system, through divine mercy, guarantees a magnified effect.
Exactly. The text uses the analogy of sowing a seed that yields exponential returns, 7 shoots, each with 100 grains. Mercy is the law of compounding interest built into the cosmic spreadsheet, ensuring that sincere effort and good intention never, ever go unrewarded. It guarantees the positive return on investment in the moral economy.
That provides a huge amount of motivation. Okay, so we have the perfect creator and the unchanging system. Now let's define humanity's job description. Where do we fit in, and what's our primary mandate?
Our core role is the Khalifah, the trustee, or the successive authority. This is a profound, delegated authority to establish and maintain a just, equitable, and flourishing social order on earth. We're tasked with administering divine law. It's an active, political, and social mandate, not just a personal spiritual one.
This immediately raises the ancient tension between divine will, qadar, and human agency. If the creator knows everything and the laws are fixed, do we truly have moral choice?
We do, absolutely. God's will is immutable because it established the fixed laws, the Sunnat Allah, but you have absolute freedom for moral and intellectual choice within that system. Your choice is the starting condition. It initiates the chain of consequence. The system guarantees if you choose to study and work, you succeed. If you choose not to, you fail. Your agency activates the law.
I remember the critique mentioned a historical school of thought, the Jazeera, that argued against free will. What's the rational danger of that kind of extreme fatalism?
The danger isn't just theological. It's social and political. Fatalistic views paralyze society, leading directly to passivity and stagnation. If you believe your actions don't matter because everything is predetermined, you stop seeking knowledge, you stop fighting injustice, you become inert. And the source material views that inertia as a profound failure of the intellect.
So the intellect, the aql, is the basis of accountability. If the mind stalls, society stalls.
Correct. The core struggles between the impulse-driven rebellious ego, the nafs, and the slower, rational, moral authority that aligns with divine law. We can even relate this back to modern neurobiology. The nafs often mirrors the immediate gratification impulse of our limbic system, while the divine law is designed to empower the rational control system, the equivalent of the prefrontal cortex. Moral development is actively empowering that rational control.
That makes the struggle incredibly relatable. It's the classic battle between the quick impulse and the disciplined long-term plan. Now let's transition to the single unforgivable sin. Shirk, associating partners with growth. Why is this so grave in this purely rational, law-governed framework?
because it's redefined here not just as a religious error, but as the ultimate act of legislative rebellion.
Wait, I thought shirk was just idol worship or praying to a statue.
That's the sensory form of it, yes. But the ultimate, most destructive form is legislative. Shirk is the ultimate systemic failure when a society grants the authority to establish supreme law, hakimiyya, to any created entity, whether it's rulers, inherited tradition, or personal desires, in contradiction to divine law.
So it's placing human-made law, be it political or cultural, above the Creator's established non-contradictory moral law. It's competing for the role of the ultimate rational principle.
Precisely. If God's law is the foundation of justice, of adl and system coherence, then shirk fundamentally destroys that foundation. It's unforgivable because society voluntarily excludes itself from the only objective source of correction, divine guidance guaranteeing systemic failure and injustice. This is why the source says God does not forgive that divinity be ascribed to other than him, because it introduces a destructive systemic drag on the entire social structure that prevents any reform.
This brings us to the great intellectual challenge that tests any rational framework. If God is perfectly loving and omnipotent, why is there suffering, injustice, and evil? The classic philosophical problem of evil.
And this challenge is addressed directly. It presents the function of hardship as a unified counterargument, moving us beyond simple sentimentality. We can summarize it with four purposes. First, life is fundamentally a test. It's an examination designed to test you as to which of you is best indeed. Hardship isn't a bug in the system. It is part of the required syllabus.
It's the crucible, refining the raw metal into steel.
Exactly. And that leads directly to the second purpose, soul building. Adversity is a necessary friction to cultivate virtues like steadfast patience or sabor and spiritual growth. You only realize the true value of ease after the effort of hardship. The system consistently promises. Surely with hardship comes ease. The difficulty is required to build the moral muscle.
But what about truly crushing, inexplicable suffering, the suffering of the innocent or massive natural disasters? How does the rational framework address that level of pain?
That's covered by the third purpose, deferred justice or the eschatological horizon. We are warned against judging the entire story by only watching the trailer. The final ledger is balanced completely on the day of resurrection, where the text confirms every soul will be paid in full. Infinite compensation can and will outweigh finite pain. A loving, just God may allow temporary loss because he guarantees a surplus return in a system that is perfectly balanced.
And the final counterargument brings us back to our responsibility as the Khalifah, as the trustee.
It confronts the problem of human inertia. The Quran argues that much suffering, the corruption on land and sea, is not some theological mystery. It's due to what people's hands have earned. The core social law states, indeed, Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change what is within themselves.
That transforms the entire equation. Suffering becomes humanity's opportunity to mirror divine compassion through active social justice.
It does. The question shifts entirely from a theological complaint. Why doesn't God end hunger? To the divine challenge. I gave you the agency, the intellect, and the means. Roll up your sleeves and become the conduit of compassion you say is missing in the world.
That is a powerful final point. It demands commitment over complaint, proving that genuine submission is active engagement, not passive fatalism. It forces us to acknowledge our agency in the system.
Which brings our deep dive to a close. We've established a rational system built on absolute perfection, Tawhid, governed by fixed, consistent laws, Sunnat Allah, and implemented by active agents, the Khalifah. This entire structure is a demand for rational engagement and moral action.
And we have to end by reflecting on the ultimate rational tension built into the divine nature, the one that stretches the aql the most. The Creator is simultaneously az-Zahir, the manifest, and al-Batin, the hidden.
This is the great intellectual mystery that underpins the whole framework. He is the manifest because he is perfectly evident in his works. His power, consistency, wisdom, they're all observable through the fixed laws and complex design of the universe. This is what validates scientific inquiry and rational investigation.
And yet, he is the hidden.
Yes, he is concealed from human perception and comprehension. His essence cannot be contained by space or time. This guards the trustee against the error of trying to physically define or limit God, forcing us to deal only with the law and the system.
So the command is to observe the flawless effects, the unwavering law in the cosmos, without attempting to grasp the ungraspable cause. You are meant to see the evidence of the designer everywhere, without ever being able to see the designer themselves.
That process of active consciousness and reflection is called dhikr, remembrance. It is not rote ritual. It is constant, active intellectual alignment. So the provocative thought for you to carry forward is this. How does the ongoing systematic law in the universe, the predictable patterns of cause and effect you observe every day, challenge your default concept of the divine? How does it compel you to move past sensory, inherited worship to an active intellectual submission? Where in your daily life can you see the flawless function of Sunatullah demanding your best effort?